Yes, hello everybody. Welcome to the webinar. I hope all you're well and please stay safe, stay strong in very troubled times which spread across Europe. I think it started here in Italy, so we were the first to suffer from this situation, unpredictable, unexpected. So what are you going through professionally and privately is something that's I think quite normal, that everybody has gone along. Also here in Italy, there was an initial underestimation of what this emergency is, and then it was then running to precautionary measures like closing down schools and universities. So this webinar is to help, to give some hints, to give you some ideas about what to do with the school close and having to quickly move with your online classes. None of us are experts. Some of you might have already e-learning resources or some distant learning, maybe individual classes, but it's something different to teach in an interactive way to group of students that have been at your school since yesterday, more or less, and now are forced to be in class and follow online. So on top of that, you have cancellation, postponement, and needing to retain students to continue with their lessons. So this is just to give you an idea. I would like to welcome our panelists here, and Joe and Adam from Wimbledon School of English. They are experts. They will help us. They will guide us through some of the questions that some of you might ask and during this session. I don't know how familiar all of you are with Zoom, but there is at the bottom of your screen, you should find, or depending how you connect with your desktop or your smartphone, there should be a chat. So you can post if you have any questions during the session. We have a question answer time on chat, and please do it in a way that attendees and panelists, so that everybody can read the questions. I see already a second chat. Someone is, maybe it's for me. Hi, Jonathan. Jonathan Queen is greeting all of us. And one thing I would say for the equal schools, there was a very good seminar done by a teacher of English language specialist, a very good seminar on the use of Zoom with very practical tips. Maybe Jonathan, if it is possible, you can share the link on the chat also for the members to use. So we shall start discussing a little bit. I will start, if you don't mind, Joe and Adam, with our experience as Lingua Viva in Italy. So schools were closed. We started closing school on the 24th of February. So we closed down the school, hoping to come back to school a week later, and just to find out that it was not possible. So what we did, it was already to have part of our students, they moved online. We work with Chinese, we work with China, so we had Chinese students, so they are very diligent. They were the first to say, we're not coming to school. And can you set up online classes for us? So we chose directly, we didn't choose directly the Zoom platform, which apparently is very popular and we looked at the various issues, and there is a question. And hi, Andreas from Spain is joining us. So we looked at the various questions related to using an online platform, and of course also teachers had to change their way of teaching. We had to put up all the material. For that we used Google Classrooms. There are several things had to be put into place. So the first question is, which system do you use? So FaceTime, Skype, or Zoom? I posed this question to Adam and to Joe, and maybe you can also also say why you prefer one to the other or a combination of the two.
Sure. Okay, well, we started off using Zoom. We started doing online classes about 2 years ago, doing part-time online classes teaching OET. So we started at that point. And when we researched it then, we found that Zoom was the best option because it has a lot of features which Skype and FaceTime don't have, which enables you to, as close as possible, replicate a classroom environment, which I think we've got more questions on those particular features later on. But broadly speaking, it was just easier to manage a large group of people and deliver material and share resources and things like that through Zoom rather than through Skype or FaceTime. So that was the reason for choosing Zoom. And that's been borne out since then. Obviously, we've seen that all the other schools that have gone online have also been using Zoom. So it seems like that's the best option.
I do know some teachers who have been using Skype and have been using Skype okay. There's just, like Joe says, there are all sorts of other options that you have available when you're using Zoom, which we're going to come on to sometime in this webinar, I think, aren't we?
I can just add that, for example, talking about the experience of Italian schools, I mean, not schools of language, generally school, high school, their own, at times they have their own platform. They use, some of them use Google Meet because Google has the G-Education suite with several features and also Google Meet. And some use Microsoft Teams, which is a video conferencing interactive platform. But I think that for interactive classes and also for the liveliness of the class, Zoom is I think it performs very, very well, very, very highly.
Another key thing about Zoom, is that it requires a much lower bandwidth to work well. So for people living in places where they don't have such good internet access, or I mean, even here, you know, sometimes our internet access is not great. Zoom is much more reliable in those situations. And I think that was the main reason that we chose to use that one in the end.
Yeah, bandwidth is, it comes to the second question, how important is the internet speed? So I think this is very important and a very important feature.
I mean, the reliability of the internet is obviously a more important feature. Zoom uses, so we think that Zoom, you can do it on 10 megabytes per second, which is actually not very much. I'm tethered to my telephone here. And so I have no broadband in this flat. And all of what I'm doing is off my telephone, which is 20 megabytes per second. So it's twice what we say is the minimum speed, and it seems to work absolutely fine. It's just that, obviously, there are times when things cut out. So it's the reliability of the internet as much as the actual speed of it.
Yes, Zoom also visualizes very well on smartphones as well, because I know from pictures that students follow their classes also from their smartphones. They use also their smartphone to connect, and this is very important.
Yeah, it's very flexible.
Yes. One thing that you might experience perhaps going online, depending where you are, is that, of course, all bands, internet, it's quite overloaded right now. So you might have moments during the day in which the internet connection is slightly unstable, or the system crashes, and this too can be an issue in delivering classes. It's something that you have to look at and to have ways of dealing with it. But let's move to our third question. Joe, you were mentioning special features that you can do with Zoom, also Adam was saying. So could you please illustrate some of them and explain a little bit more?
Sure, no problem. So when we were looking at how we can replicate a classroom the closest, we thought the most important things are what the students can see and what they can do in terms of interaction, and what they can do in terms of receiving information and kind of using the resources that we have. So the benefits of Zoom are you can share your screen. Now, obviously Skype also has that feature, but it's an important one to have. So you can share, for example, if you have slides on a whiteboard which you've already prepared, you can use those, or presentation slides with PowerPoint. So it enables teachers to use resources they've already created, which was really key for us, especially when it was a very last minute change. Another really important thing, probably I think the most important feature, is the breakout rooms, because that enables students to do pair and group speaking work, which is really probably the most important thing, I think, for an interactive class. So what that means is, if you look at the bottom of the screen, where it says, well, actually, I guess with the webinar, we can't do it. And if you're hosting, it's only if you're hosting, you can do it. You can select participants to put together into a separate chat room. So you can put students in pairs or groups, give them a task, put them into a chat room, then they get on with the task without being able to hear the other groups. And the teacher can drop into each of those rooms as they're happening to check on what's going on, which is basically like a classroom. You're putting your students into groups and you're going around and monitoring each of those groups to see what they're doing. At the end of the activity, you can bring them all back into the main room. That, for me, I think is probably the most important feature.
Can I just come in there on breakout rooms, Joe?
Yeah.
So something to be aware of with breakout rooms is that they're not very fast. So moving between them is not an instantaneous thing. And sometimes it can be 10 or 20 seconds that you actually have to wait in a sort of nothing zone while you're waiting for certain breakout rooms to load. And so this actually goes in with the attitude that teachers and students have to have with these classes, because it's not boom, 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 boom. It's not fast. And there's always a little bit of downtime with these things. And so breakout rooms work fine as long as everybody has the attitude of, it's okay, in a few seconds this will load and it'll all be all right. But we are going to talk a little bit later on, I think, about certain attitudes and certain ways of dealing with these kinds of things. But that's something to be aware of with the breakout rooms, is they're not instantaneous groups.
I think, yeah, that goes with that, yeah, as you said, Adam, the whole, one of the main differences between live teaching and online teaching is that the pauses. You have to have a bit more patience, you have to have a lot more waiting. And so I think it's so important to be clear about that with the students up front. Say, you may have to wait for 30 seconds while things are loading, but also it's very tiring to be online. Your ears get tired, your eyes get tired. So you need those little breaks for your brain to reset. So as long as the students are aware that it's going to happen and it's actually useful if it happens, it's not a problem. Something else, another key feature which is helps to make classroom management a lot easier, is the muting and hand raising features. Because obviously if there are 20, well, we don't have 20 students in a class, but let's say there are 10 students in a class, all of them talking and wanting to speak to the teacher, it's great and it's fantastic they can do that. But it gets a bit overwhelming for the teacher, and for the students, you can't really hear each other. So what we suggest is that you mute all of the students, and then there is a raise hand function where the students can raise a virtual hand or a real hand, so that the teacher knows they want to ask. The teacher can then unmute that student and get the question. Or if the teachers are getting answers from students, they can nominate a student and then unmute them, get the answer, remute them, and then nominate another student for the next answer. So again, this is really replicating the classroom environment in a very controlled way that makes the students feel like they're involved, but it's not too overwhelming for the teacher.
Because obviously one of the things when teaching these classes is that there is background noise. And so there might be, people might be sharing a house, there might be a baby crying, there might be all sorts of things going on inside the flat. So if you have 10 of these different circumstances all coming together at the same time, it can make quite a lot of noise. So muting everybody, actually there are settings in Zoom. So if you go onto the website of Zoom, then there's all the settings, and you can actually set it that everybody is automatically muted from the beginning when they come into the the lesson, which can help too. So there are lots of different ways to approach this. I'd like to talk about my background. So as we're talking about all the different things you can do with Zoom, it is possible, as you can see, to have a virtual background. I don't have a green screen, but because my computer's quite a reasonable one and the camera's quite a good one, it comes out like this. It's not perfect. You see, there are sort of strange things around it, like that, for example. But it is possible to do a bit of branding with your company to make it nice and to also block out anything that you have behind you. I only have a wall, which is probably the best way to do it. If you have things that are a bit more complicated, so we tried it, for example, with Joe's screen this morning, and it came out like you were in a jungle. So these things don't always work perfectly. If you can get a green screen, it would work perfectly, but obviously buying things like green screens at the moment is not the easiest thing to do.
One remark, sorry interrupting you, that Jonathan Quinn tells us, of course, muting, relating to muting and unmuting students. Muting students also is good because of background noises, of course, you know, like you were saying, that it's good because it eliminates any background noises that might be during a presentation or during an explanation if the students are not unmuted. So
and I know, sorry, Jonathan asked about echoes. If there are two people using it in the same room, then you get a really bad echo because there's kind of a feedback loop. So if, for example, we have a situation where there are two students in the same host family, both having online classes with us, they need to be in separate rooms, otherwise there will be an echo. But otherwise, unmuting doesn't really cause echo problems, but just a lot of background noise.
Either separate rooms or, like Georgia has, headsets.
Even with headsets, no, there still causes a bit of echo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. One question that now it has nothing to do, but maybe relates a little bit to the multiple students and came out in the forum. It's not on the question we discussed before. It's, what is the ideal group to teach on Zoom? Is it really, I mean, Zoom can be, it can be a webinar for 100 participants, but what would be an ideal situation for a teacher? How many students in a group?
I would say in terms of managing the interaction, we've done it with groups of about 10, that works fine. You could go up to 20, it just needs a lot of careful teacher management. So as we said, having all the students muted, nominating and using the raise hand system is the best way of doing that. I think otherwise it's too chaotic. But I would say about 10 is kind of optimal number. What do you think, Adam?
Yeah, no, something like that, 10 to 15. And also the types of classes, actually, from what we've seen so far, it seems like exam classes actually work a little bit easier than general English classes, because exam classes, as they are kind of do this exercise, come back, feedback, this one, and some listenings. And so types of classes, yeah, sizes 10 to 15, and types of classes, exam classes for sure, general English classes as well, but then a lot of the things that we would normally try in general English classes have to be changed, whereas exam classes can fit more into the Zoom system. But I think we're going to come onto this in a bit as well, aren't we?
Okay. One other question was the feature of the possibility that Zoom gives to record the lesson.
Mm-hmm.
Do you do that? Maybe a student is absent, maybe a teacher, is this something that you have tried?
Adam, I'll leave that one for you.
Yeah, the record function is useful for all sorts of things, because obviously there is, even online, or especially online, there are very strict child protection and safeguarding rules that we still have to abide by. So especially, for example, if there's a student who's under 18, and if the teacher is one-on-one with that student, they can't be one-on-one with a student online. So recording, making sure that we get the consent, preferably in writing from the parent, and the verbal consent on the recorded video is a very useful thing. It is also possible for any teacher to record their lessons for whatever purposes, whether it's marketing purposes, whether it is performance purposes. You should always make sure that you get the consent of the student. And you can do it in recording. So you can start recording, you can say to the students, I'm recording this, do I have your consent? And they can say yes, and then they give their consent.
There's also an option on Zoom, if you're going to automatically record, to request consent when participants join the room as well. So there are lots of ways to do that. As Adam said, a really useful tool. We found teachers a bit reluctant to record automatically. They don't, I think, as we all know, teaching is a very kind of personal thing, and people don't really like being observed too much all the time. So there has to be a good reason, I think, to record the lessons to justify it. But yeah, it's a useful feature, definitely. And you can save those recordings and save them as a resource for the students or for the teachers as well.
And you can choose whether those recordings are saved onto the cloud or onto the teacher's laptop. Obviously, the best place to save things, especially if you're talking about under 18s, is onto the cloud. So you don't want any kind of contact details or any recordings of under 18s on anybody's personal computers. And actually, this is something I think we're going to come back to at the end, is talking a little bit about permissions and sharing of information, because the laws haven't changed. We still have to be careful of GDPR. We still have to be careful of safeguarding. And so we will, I think, come on to this at the end.
Okay. Another question that came up before was the use to set up multiple cameras for teaching. Maybe the idea, I suppose, I don't know, the background idea is to have the possibility, but I think this will be a later step, to have both in presence and online distance learning classes at the same time. This was something that a member from our Japanese school, I think, even said that he implemented. And we haven't tried it out yet. I don't know if you have tried out this, because now we are only doing exclusively distance learning. They cannot be at school.
We haven't done multiple cameras, I don't think. Adam, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, we haven't actually done it. No, go ahead, Joe.
No. Well, I mean, we haven't done a kind of multiple camera scenario. We did do a combination of live and online last week with one of our classes, because some of the students wanted to self-isolate. So the teacher had a camera set up in the room, and the students also, the live students in the room, and was doing it simultaneously live and online. And that seemed to work very well with one camera. I'm not sure how multiple cameras would work with Zoom if it's live, because obviously you can't be really switching between cameras while you're teaching. For recording purposes, that might work, but I'm not sure for live teaching if it would.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Very good. Then one other question is, of course, in this time in which a lot is going on online, a lot of a huge, I mean, I don't know how much it is quantified, but there is a huge amount of data on the internet, and an enormous, I suppose, an enormous amount of video conferences happening at the same time, for example, on a platform like Zoom. So what to do if there is a crash, or the internet is unstable, or if it cuts out? How can we deal with this problem?
Adam, do you want to take that one?
Sure. I mean, partly it is the overall mentality of both the teachers and the students. So everybody needs to understand that there will be times when the internet doesn't work, and not to panic. That's the most important thing. If teachers can say this at the beginning of a lesson and set something up, say, if this happens, then you can go and read this or complete this task or whatever else. Or simply that you say, well, there's this 15 minutes when we can't get online, but then in a short while we will be able to again, so we can just delay the start of a class. Obviously, you need to be able to get in contact with students. which if there is a complete internet outage, that's a very difficult thing. If it's simply that there's not enough bandwidth for Zoom to work, and that maybe in a short amount of time it will be okay, then you just ask everybody to be patient. We do, as I said previously about the laws, GDPR still exists, and so sharing students' telephone numbers from the school to the teachers is a difficult thing. If the students share their telephone numbers with the teacher, that's slightly different. But the teacher shouldn't have on their personal telephone the telephone numbers of the students without the students' permission, and especially if they're under 18. And so this could be something it's all about working out the procedures of what you do in that circumstance. In our case, it often involves us telling Jo, who is the director of studies, and then she will contact the students so that we're not sharing out all of this personal information.
The same goes with teacher emails. Of course, we're using the teachers' work emails, which are set up, through the school. We can't use the teachers' personal emails because we can't give teachers' emails to the students. So, there's a lot of things to consider about access and privacy and things like that.
We had our experience is that when we closed down, and also because of the students, I have a group with the students with their consent, of course. We work with adult students, so I have a WhatsApp group, Lingua Due students. And then we have, for our Asian students, we have a tutor on WeChat. Right, a school tutor. So we send always the communication through this group. So it has happened to us that I was notified by a teacher that one day at the beginning, 2 weeks ago, Zoom crashed. So thanks heaven, we ended the morning lesson, the set of the morning lesson, but then we had to start the afternoon session, so the teacher could not access Zoom. So we were all quite upset. We said, "Why it's not working anymore?" We just, but it was just that the system had crashed, and thanks heaven, this lasted like half an hour, 40 minutes. But in that occasion, so the first thing we did was, okay, we start with an hour delay. So we send a message. I sent a message to my student group on WhatsApp. The class will start at this time, and so we communicated that to the students. Then the problem was solved. So we rewrote. If you want, we can start earlier. But I mean, at times in these times, you need to improvise a little bit. Always, of course, maintaining the rules, privacy and consent forms and all this. But you need to take quick decision and improvise a little bit when this happens, of course. Another, and then of course it's also when you have a class and a student, maybe because it has an internet shortage on his part, or the cell phone battery, or the cell phone went down. What do you do in that case if a student temporarily cannot attend? You go on? What strategies can we adopt?
Again, what we've excuse me. What we've done in those cases is the student has contacted me, and I've tried to advise them on how they can connect, or to try and sort of virtually find out what the problem is. That's so far been successful, even though I'm not that technologically aware. So, thank goodness that's worked. Beyond that, I think I don't have the technical expertise really. I would probably pass something like that over to Adam, or one of our other colleagues, Duncan, who's also been instrumental in this. So Adam, over to you.
Well, strangely, I was going to talk about the teacher perspective.
Yeah.
I think we had this situation yesterday or the day before that one of the students couldn't get online, and it took them a while. And actually what the teacher used in that circumstance was, there was only 3 people in the class. So the other 2 went into a breakout room, and the teacher then gave the student that had just joined all the instructions and went through very quickly what they'd been going over, and then brought the class together. So it's all about this understanding and improvisation, and not panicking.
Yeah. I think improvisation is the key, and being responsive to what's going on, not being too rigid in how you expect the lesson to go, and being able to just change things last minute. Also, the fact that you can kind of share the resources is really helpful. So if they miss the beginning of the lesson, they can still access those resources. You can still give them the worksheets, for example, much like if a student turns up late to a regular class. We deal with it in a similar way.
Okay, so from what you've just described and from what you said, it is fundamental, the role of the teacher. Just as in a live class, of course, the teacher has the control. But I think that most probably the teacher has even more control in a distance learning situation. So what are the things that the teacher should pay attention to? Talking differently, the fact that they are always frontline, because in a class situation, you might, when students are doing some exercises, you might have that 60 seconds break from talking, from giving instruction and just overseeing. So, but a teacher now needs to teach and also oversee and manage technically. So what are your suggestions?
So I think there are a few things that are really important to remember. The first thing is that, as we said earlier, everything is slower, everything has pauses. You have to be ready for those pauses, ready for things to take a little bit longer, to upload a file, to share a screen, to put a breakout room in. So one thing is for everyone to be more kind of, not slower necessarily, but more methodical in how they organize the lesson. Speaking a little more slowly, because it's harder to take in information through a screen than it is live. It's harder to read the rest of the body language and all of that. So where we grade language according to students' level and speed, we need to just do that a little bit more. So a little bit slower. Chunking is super important, because again, it's harder to take in information. So we need to break up our speech into really significant chunks so the students can take in that information, take in that language before they move on to the next instruction. Along with that are a lot more concept check questions, but also instruction check questions. So you need to really check the students are with you up to the point of the lesson before you move on to the next point. So those are some really important things in terms of delivery. Adam, anything else you want to add?
So obviously you're going through the internet, and as you hear, I'm sure with this, it's not always crystal clear, which does cause problems sometimes with listenings. So it's possible to play a listening through the share screen function on Zoom, which sometimes is absolutely perfect and sometimes is almost inaudible. So it's making sure that students can actually hear the listenings. Obviously you have the chat function that is very useful for that. So you can, if you have a problem with a listening, it is possible to send a file through chat, and you can then, the student can play that file on their own computer. Not all devices are the same with Zoom. So if you're using a mobile phone, you don't necessarily receive the files that come through chat. And then you need to find other ways, if it's necessary, of sharing files. So there are all sorts of different ways. One is setting up a Microsoft SharePoint and giving everybody access to this, open access with a code. You can do it through Google Docs as well. The way that we prefer at the moment is through WeTransfer, where everybody gets a code. So you're not putting in anybody's email addresses. You're simply getting a code, and you put the code into the chat, and students can then follow that code. As I say, they're just some of the options. There are lots of different ways of doing it, but you have to be aware. And as Joe said, you need to make sure that the students are actually following the lesson. So if a student does have a problem with hearing and listening, they need to be able to tell you immediately, and you deal with it accordingly.
There is a function on Zoom, share computer audio, and that doesn't work all the time. You're saying that, Adam? Okay.
Sometimes it's great, and sometimes it isn't.
Okay. Okay.
It's good to have another way of doing it in case it doesn't work.
Yeah. Okay. And I would add here to this to the question of what teachers are you using only Zoom? I mean, you're saying that you're using WeTransfer, you're using well, maybe Dropbox can also be used for some for sending documents. Do you combine any, for example, of G-Education Suite by Google Classrooms, Google Drive, or any of this?
We haven't, although one of our colleagues, Sean, who set up the original OET online classes, and he was the one who did the original research into Zoom and all these things, he uses Google Classroom a little bit, I think, Adam, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. There are just plenty of options. The Google Classroom is generally free, I believe.
Yeah, it's free.
Pay for. Dropbox is fine as long as it's not for big files, and then it's sometimes Dropbox can be the best option if everybody has an icon and everybody's on a computer. Then it can be brilliant because you can simply put the file into Dropbox and then delete it when you're finished with it. So yeah, there are just plenty of there's no one solution to this, and you can't do everything from Zoom. Microsoft Teams is another thing that people are using quite often, I think. Mm-hmm. And there is a video function on there too. So it would conceivably be possible to also have this kind of webinar or class through Microsoft Teams. That's not something that we're doing.
Mm-hmm. What about material resources? You had already online material ready, interactive, or what did you do? Did you upload PDFs, always in a copyright, respecting copyright law, or exercises? How do you involve your students to fill in, some exercises like fill in the gaps and things like that? Did you do anything special? Did you upload anything? Do you have any suggestion for the teaching material?
We did pretty much all of those things.
Okay.
Adam, actually, you were more responsible for getting the resources up. So,
well, in our main school where all this is taking place, actually, pretty much all of the students have the course books. Okay, so actually, they're still following course books. There are classes which are not from the course book. And then, yes, there's all sorts of shareable materials that we've used. As Joe said, we've built our own. We have had to, the audio library was actually the most difficult thing because actually all of our audios are stored on a central server in the school. And so getting access to all of those files remotely has been quite a lot of work, just repetitive work, just uploading things onto a server. Luckily, we actually had a system already where we did have a cloud server. And so now all the teachers have access to all of this information. They all have their own logins. But yeah, there are, as we've said, lots of times, there are lots of ways of doing this.
Something else that we've done, which is useful as well, what we've done, the teachers have done, is preparing their own lessons on slides, either using the interactive whiteboard software that we use, or with PowerPoint or other presentation software, and also using scanning apps on the phone, so they can scan a worksheet and send that to the students. So I think, as we've said, in all of this, using all the different avenues, all the different ways of communicating, all the different ways of sharing materials, and being able to use lots of different things is what makes it, I think, successful, because it's not too rigid. You can do you have a lot of variety.
Do all teachers react so positively to this digital change? What is your experience? Or some teachers are scared?
Yeah, I mean, it's a sudden change. And this, as I said, this is something we've been doing for a couple of years. And for the last couple of years, there's been a lot of resistance. It's a new thing that people perhaps aren't so comfortable with. So there have been some teachers that really embraced it from the beginning and have been instrumental in helping now with the training, and others who obviously didn't embrace it so fully. However, the necessity and the kind of the urgency of it now in this kind of crisis moment, everyone has pulled together really, really well. And because they've had to, and it's something new that they have to kind of get their heads around, they've really embraced it. And I have to say, you know, we've dragged them through a training program for the week before we went online, and kind of really intensive, lots of training, lots of practice. And they've been amazing. They've really been amazing. They've thoroughly embraced it. They've kind of got over their fears. Even the ones who were really worried about it have pretty much, I think, got to grips with it now. And they've worked together a lot. All the teachers have worked in small teams to practice together. And it's been incredible. They've been really inspiring in the way that they've embraced it. So yes, I think when it's necessary, people can do pretty much anything.
Yeah. Are there any best practices or suggestions for schools that are implementing this right now, or they will soon?
I think preparation is the key, making sure before you start, you have everything in place, you know exactly how to respond to every situation. With the teachers, making sure the teachers are really clear in what they're doing, giving them lots of opportunity to practice and to ask questions to management or to whoever's doing the training in advance. So all of the preparation work we've done has meant that it's been very successful. So in terms of training and preparing, certainly that has been key. In terms of actually within classes, I'm not sure, Adam, anything to add to that?
No, not really. That was basically what I was going to say, was training and support.
Yeah.
They're the most important thing, and setting up, all that you just said.
My suggestion is same: training, support. We've been doing this now for 3 weeks, and also exploring possibilities of combining various features to help you to help teachers preparing their material, so during the lesson, and make the class sort of interactive. And actually there are many schools that already work with distance learning. When this happened, for example, that we had to close and we chose Zoom, I did talk to a friend of mine. She works in a high school which is specialized IT, and they do both in attendance and distance learning during the year for their students. And she's an Apple certified teacher. It's an Apple school practically. Everything gets given by them, sponsored by Apple. But she has given me some tips on certain programs that you can use, material that you can prepare, which can be interesting. You know, there are there are quizzes that you can insert in a YouTube video, and the program is called Edpuzzle or something of the sort. There are videos that you can make with Screen-O-Matic, and so I will share just now, if I can manage my screen so that you see something. I don't know if it's possible. And I will share, okay. So here you can see like Pearl Trees. Pearl Trees is a platform in which, for example, you can build a lesson unit, and you can put various materials, from images, from notes, text. For example, here I have, for this, I have added some possible programs like eMaze, Edpuzzle tutorial, Screencast-O-Matic, which is a free tutorial to record presentation or short videos for students. And this was a tutorial we used, which we found very useful at the beginning on Zoom, given by a video conferencer. So, and this platform is called PearlTrees.com. If there are any French schools, they might know it, because apparently it's a platform which is used a lot in French high school by teachers to set up materials for their, and prepare their unit of lessons. So I think it's worthwhile also exploring what is there and what can be used, also because we don't know how long this will be.
Well, yeah, and this is an opportunity as much as I mean, it's a dreadful situation that we're all in, but actually, if people start to see it as that opportunity to broaden their teaching experience, like you've just shown us, Giorgia, you know, we're all learning all the time. And actually, we've been very lucky that I think our teachers generally have seen it that way.
Definitely.
And because they've seen it that way, then they're enthusiastic and they want to learn more and more. And so, although all of this is new, in many ways, it's the same as it always was. It's managing people. We're all in academic management, and it's making sure everybody's okay. It's still the same thing. And it's still about making sure that they have that mentality. Well, our fingers go strange when you do that. It's making sure you have that mentality of people saying, yes, I want to do this, and then anything's possible.
And I think in this moment, you know, because everything's in flux, everything's changing, we're all kind of uncertain, we're all quite stressed about it. It's something to hang on to and something we can do and focus on. And so I think people have embraced it in that way as well, that it's a kind of a relief from the crisis stress in a way to learn this new skill and to see, oh, this is something new and exciting that we can do.
Adam, may I go back before it's already, we are almost ending our seminar. You wanted to add some more about GDPR, consent?
I think I've probably covered most of it.
Okay, you covered most of it. Okay, good. So we still have, I think, 10 minutes left for two. Are there any questions from the audience? You can use the chat and I can read out the questions. And please send it to panelists and attendees so everybody can see it. The chat function is at the bottom of your screen. Stephanie from BSL, I would like to get insight on how other schools are doing intake procedure, placement testing for new students, and how they are doing formal assessments for the classes, weekly quizzes, and level up tests.
I think some of this is that talking about this opportunity that this is then moving all of the questionnaires online, for example, so you can have Google Forms and you can simply do all of the placement tests as on an online platform. We would normally have one piece of paper with the questions, one piece of paper as an answer sheet. That's not necessary anymore. We can simply send a link so that somebody simply completes the questions. In many ways, it actually is simpler to do this.
Okay, there is another question from, I didn't read it. Is there, S Black to all panelists, is there a free version of Zoom adequate for a school? Or if not, what's the best option, for example, with 5 classrooms?
Zoom has a free version at the moment. So in general, Zoom limits meetings of more than 3 people to 40 minutes. They are changing that.
On the free version.
On the free version. In many countries, I'm not sure what the situation is in the UK at the moment, but I know that it's certainly in Italy, in Germany, and other places where they'd already declared a disaster or an emergency. Zoom was making those free hosting, so the free version of Zoom was able to have limitless classes. Now, there are still some things that you can do with the paid version that you can't do with the free version, such as the breakout rooms work a lot better with the paid version. There are many different ways of doing this. There are many different sites. So if Google Chat or Hangouts work, or if Skype works, or there are lots of options. If you don't want to pay for it, then it's about experimenting a little bit, I think. We have the pro account of Zoom, and that seems to work very well.
That is what we did as well for our school. We bought 10 licenses. I use for my purposes a free version, which now I know why I can talk so much when I do meetings. You know, you have to set up a meeting. It must be recurring. You need to send an ID to the students. So there are 2 questions more. One is from Jonathan Quinn and says, how many on the online management team?
Well, I guess there's been 3 of us really working on it, 3 or 4, I suppose, actually, haven't there, Adam?
Yeah.
On and off, because people have been off or on, but there's been sort of 3 or 4 of us working on it for the last 2 weeks, I would say.
But a lot of that's been set up. And so after the setup, then there's obviously less work to do. They needed 3 people, I think, pretty much to move the whole school online. And then after that, then it can run a bit smoother.
Luis Carrion from Nerja asks, how an online group course should be organized, should be offered in terms of number of hours? 1, 2, 3 hours compared to the standard of 4 hours. Do you offer full classes or reduced?
At the moment, we're offering our full schedule because we've literally moved the classrooms from the school into the online. Going forward, I think we'll offer slightly reduced, mainly because of the access issues. So students accessing from different parts of the world will have problems if the classes run all day. So further on, we're looking at doing something, just in the morning or just in the afternoon, something like that. In terms of the number of hours that you can take as a student learning, I think it's tough to do a full day. I don't think all day, every day is ideal. You need lots of breaks. It's very, very tiring to sit, and especially if you've got headphones on, it hurts your ears a little bit. It hurts your eyes. So 4 hours a day, I think, would be the maximum realistically if it's going to be every day. But it really depends on what your school can do, and who the students are, where they're coming from, what their kind of what their expectation is as well.
I can say from our experience, we've been doing this for 3 weeks, that we had to move the classes online because we had to close down. So we gave the students their full day. So this means three full hours, 3 hours of 60-minute teachings with breaks in the morning, and then they had the 1.5 hours in the afternoon if they were taking a more intensive course, with a lunch break, of course, in between. We've also experienced with one group of students that had a particular program that we could hold our cultural seminars. That was appreciated. So we have, I don't know, like a seminar on opera. So we could show them a video, do anyway the opera seminar. We have a seminar on Italian movies and things like that. And the students did appreciate. I think also from the student point of view, if they're not returning home, but if they're here and they have to be at home, this moment is important for them in their daily routine, because they meet their school friends, they have a contact with the teacher, they have a contact to the school. So, this is very, very important. This is at least for our experience. And it is so important that when students, like in Milano, I had some students returning home now, they went back to Germany and France, that once they returned home, they wanted to continue. So, we had course extension for our online classes, and they wanted to continue for another week or 2 weeks, to continue with classes. So, so it is not only negative, but it's also something positive for the students, especially in this moment, because it's almost like a psychological help to have this daily routine of classes, more or less like it was at school, even if they are obliged to be home. This is at least from our personal experience. We have some other questions. So regarding Zoom, we said the free, or you can sign up on a monthly basis. You don't need to then to renew your license in case. I've done the same thing. Unfortunately, I will need to renew because apparently we are closed until the end of April. So be ready for it. We thought until mid-April, and we're starting to go down. So, it could go on much longer than you now foresee. Jonathan Queen is saying cinema club. Well, not really a cinema club. So because I think that students can go on Netflix, and maybe you can give them suggestions to watch something. But I don't know.
I think if you do things, so there's all sorts of things that you can do, like you were talking about the opera workshops or this sort of stuff. Actually, online, like I said before, is a huge opportunity where you can do all sorts of different types of classes with a particular group of students. And so if there is something like a cinema club where you all watch a film and then come together afterwards and talk about it, there's all kinds of different things that is possible using this online platforms. So yes, cinema club I think would be a great idea, in the same way as the opera is a great idea.
Yeah.
And sorry, just I've noticed Jonathan mentioned starting a discussion, look at a movie. Watch parties, for example, where everyone watches something on Netflix, but they're also, let's say, on a laptop or on their iPad, but they're also connected through Zoom or another video chat feature, so they can talk together while they're watching the show. Some of my friends have been doing that, separately from the school, and that's a really nice way to kind of have a get together with a type of cinema club.
Yeah, I think that, also in our private experience, I'm doing aperitivo with my friends on Zoom. We are doing Saturday coffee morning, discussing book club, so, we're trying to spend our time. So more questions. Is the pro cost per license? Yes. In Ireland, $13.99 per month per host. For 5 classes, would need then 5 licenses. Probably obvious, but want to be clear.
Yeah, we were speaking with people at Zoom who did offer us a slightly better deal, but that was to get yearly licenses. Whereas, as we've talked about at the moment, we're just working on a monthly basis.
Hopefully,
yes.
Yes. Then there was another question from Marco Syrak to all panelists. Have you realized the differences in regards of setting when using the Zoom client compared to when using the web version? I'm not sure I understand the question. Some options are not available in the client.
Is that as in through the browser rather than through the Zoom app, possibly?
Yeah. I suppose, yes.
Any ideas on this?
I think when you're hosting, you really should. I don't think you even have the option to use the web version. So the host, the teacher, if you will always be in the client. But actually, the pro version of the client, we haven't noticed any problems with that at all. I'd be interested actually to know what you're referring to, Marco, if that is, if you found something in particular, because we haven't really seen that.
So, okay. So
the one
they
from,
will.
S Black, the last one about Edmodo. Edmodo is one of those that we are helping the teachers to start to use. Yes. Yeah.
Some teachers have been using it actually for quite a long time, just with their regular classrooms, and obviously it works perfectly for online as well.
Yeah, Edmodo is one of the platform which was suggested to use. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so thank you very much for participating. This session will be recorded. I think that William can send you a link, or it will be available. And Marco is answering before we close. The web version has a better overview, like a little green light showing that the host teacher is online. Can see in the app. So this is the answer. The web version is better than the app version.
Yeah, I think there are settings. So sometimes you can set it that nobody can go into the class until the teacher is there. So there's all sorts of settings which are both on the web browser and on the client, the app, that they do. I think they go together, because I've been setting some things online and some things on the app. And actually, when I go on the app and use it, then it has worked itself through.
Okay. So I would like to thank our panelists, Joe and Adam. Thank you for your time. Thank you for all the attendees. These are difficult times. We'll stay safe, stay strong. It will pass. We are all together in this. We'll have other webinars as well, maybe discussing the economic financial impact, marketing strategies in these quite unprecedented and unpredictable times. So thank you everybody for attending, and have a lovely day. Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Giorgia. Thanks.
Bye. 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 Bye.